So up until this point, then we've been talking about motivation and how important that is on your spiritual path. First, you have to understand what you're aiming for. And once you know what your goal is, then you need to look for the most effective methods that will help you to achieve your goal. And this requires a certain amount of study. For example, if you're motivated to become reunified with the Brahman, now that's the path of the dual yogas, right? Well, in their text, then it's all laid out very clearly what you need to do. There's a yam, a niyam, there's a san, and pranayam, pratyahara, etc. There's all kinds of things laid out there in this eightfold path to achieving reunification with the Brahman. So after motivation, then what's the most important consideration? Well, that is preparation. And when I say preparation, I don't mean that you need to find a cushion to sit on and a table to put your Buddha statue. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say preparation, I mean that you have to prepare yourself for the path. And the most important thing is that you have to have conviction in what you're doing. You have to understand what your motivation is, and based on understanding that motivation, then next, you have to look for the effective methods that are going to help you achieve your goal. You need to believe in what you're doing and what you're applying yourself to. Otherwise, you won't have the requisite diligence in order to achieve your goal. And so when it comes to Mahayana Buddhism, then we have something called the preliminaries. And often people think that these preliminaries are all about counting numbers. For example, 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 mantras, etc. But that's not really what we're talking about when we say preliminaries. The root or foundation of practice is gaining conviction in your path. And in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, then the first thing we do is something called the four thoughts that turn the mind from samsara. As I was saying in the previous video, then there are various different motivations for practicing on the spiritual path. And one of these is to achieve liberation from the mundane world. And so, in order to generate this desire to achieve liberation from the mundane world, you have to believe that there's a problem with the mundane world, that it's something you want to escape. And in order to do this, then you need to contemplate. And what we do is we contemplate the four thoughts. The first of these four thoughts is the precious human existence. And what that is, basically, is to understand that being born as a human, you have a unique opportunity in order to seek liberation from the mundane world. And it's an opportunity that other beings, such as animals and hell beings, don't have. Or, as is the case with the devas, because of their extreme experiences of bliss and well-being, they're not motivated to seek liberation from samsara. They live in a God realm, right? Everything is blissful. They're tricked into believing that samsara is a wonderful place, filled with exquisite experiences. And so, they're not as fortunate as human beings. Really, when it comes down to it, we think that somebody living in God realm is much better off than we are. And we can see this by the way we relate to the rich and famous, pop stars, and the billionaires and oligarchs in the world. We kind of envy them for their power and their wealth. We think it's a wonderful thing. But what is taught in the Buddha Dharma is that these extreme experiences of well-being and resources are an obstacle to us achieving our goal on the spiritual path. The second contemplation, or the second way in which we prepare ourselves for our meditation, is to contemplate on death and impermanence. Basically, what we need to do is we need to believe that our time is limited, that this unique opportunity we have isn't going to last. Understanding this, then we're able to apply ourselves with diligence in our practice. If we don't recognize that things are impermanent and that these temporary experiences of well-being won't last, then we'll have no encouragement in order to get on with our practice. We need a sense of urgency. And so in order to develop that sense of urgency, then we need to meditate on death and impermanence. Now, many Westerners don't like meditating on these things. They find it depressing. And in general, then many people think that Buddhism is a very depressing practice because we're always talking about suffering. But the truth is, suffering is undeniable. And if you want to go beyond suffering, then there's only one way. You have to seek liberation. The third thought that we contemplate in the Buddha Dharma is the thought of karma, cause and effect. And this is something I was talking about the other day. If one doesn't believe in karma cause and effect, then likewise, one won't see the connection between virtuous actions and beneficial outcomes in the future. Also, one will have no reason to avoid negativity, because if there's no mechanism by which karma will cause us to suffer for our negative actions that we commit in this life, there's no real reason for us to avoid negativity. The final contemplation that we engage in as a preparation for the Buddhist path is to contemplate the negativities of the mundane world. And there's many ways we can do this, but it doesn't just rely upon reading ancient scriptures. All you have to do is look at the internet or pick up a newspaper, and you'll see that there's a lot of negativity in the world. In fact, these days, the state of the world is almost unimaginable. There is so much war and conflict, and people are so polarized. It's almost as if we're all on a highway to hell, and there's no turning back. And so, it's by contemplating the negativities that exist in the world that we gain this impetus or this encouragement to dedicate ourselves to our practice. And as I was saying the other day, then you may not even believe in something called liberation or awakening. And your goal may be more short-term and worldly. For example, you may just want to achieve some sense of well-being or peace and quiet in your life. And if it is the case that you're merely meditating to relax, then there's still ways in which you can prepare yourself. Because as I said in the beginning of this video, what you need is conviction. You need conviction that the practice you're doing is going to lead to the results you want. So really, before you even start your practice, what you need to do is to gain some conviction in the path you're on. And by having that conviction, you'll have a strong impetus to practice. You will naturally develop this sense of diligence, this joyous effort, this ability to apply yourself to your practice. And once you have this conviction, once you have this desire to practice and to seek out the results, then the next thing is you need to start habituating yourself to your practice. And this involves committing yourself to a schedule. So that means you have to decide when you're going to meditate and try to stick to it. If you decide you're going to meditate for 1 hour a day every morning at 5 o'clock, and then after only a few days you fall off the wagon, then you're never going to gain the momentum you need to achieve your goal. You need to be diligent, you need to apply yourself. And in order to do that, then routine is very important. Ultimately, routining is not the most important thing, but we all need a routine in order to gain the habit for practice. And so what you need to do is don't challenge yourself too much early on. Set a realistic goal. For example, I'm able to get up at 6 in the morning and meditate every day for 15 minutes. Once you've achieved that, you might find that later on you're able to do 2 sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And naturally, as you become more skilled and habituated to the practice of meditation, you'll be able to sit for longer periods of time. If you work in this way, then your practice will for certain 100% develop. Often people make the mistake that they try to do too much too early and they burn themselves out. This isn't the best way to develop a good meditative practice. The best thing to do is to recognize where you are and be realistic about your abilities. And then, once you're comfortable with your practice, is push the boundaries little by little until you are more able to commit yourself with greater intensity to your practice. So these are just a few thoughts and generalized comments I wanted to make for our meditation practice. In the instructions on meditation itself, then I'll go over some of the techniques and suggest some of the ways in which you're able to achieve your goal through meditation. So until then see you next time.